Okay. Got it. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Dallán. I'm a first degree initiate of Stone Circle Wicca. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm from Michigan. And today we have a panel discussion on how does the underworld or otherworld fit into your tradition. Our panelists today are Eric Eldritch, Anthony Nelson, and Matthew Sidney. So what I would like to do after introductions is lead us all into something for just to help us relax, because I know we're all experiencing a little Zoom fatigue. So let's have the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. I'll invite Anthony to start.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may exist. My name is Anthony. I currently reside in Columbus, Ohio. I am a initiated priest in the Temple of Ascending Flame. This is a left-hand path temple. My main practice is bone witchery, but I prefer one of the terms of necromancy. I do a lot of my work in and around the death current, which I will talk about tomorrow. And as you know, we've talked about death before. It's not spooky. It's not. It's actually a very healing path. And I'm very excited to kind of share what I do.
Great. Thank you. Matthew, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Matthew Sidney, and I am one of several teachers of Unnamed Path. I've been involved in that tradition for probably around 8 years. And in addition to that, I am a lifelong spiritual seeker. My personal practice has involved wonderful experience and education from practitioners of traditional Lakota religion, traditional Thai ancestor work, traditional Caribbean spiritist practices. I'm a musician, writer, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eldritch.
Hey everyone. Hi, I'm Eldritch. I'm with Stone Circle Wicca. I'm a priestess of the 3rd degree, and I use he, him pronouns. I live in Washington, D.C., but I'm currently up here in Pittsburgh visiting family, and it's been really good. So you won't see as much of me. I'm splitting time back and forth. My first experience with the dark night of the soul is something that may be common to many people. It's moving out of a cultish Christian practice, and I'll talk more about that later, about how I became ex-evangelical, people that are sick and tired of being told who to hate, including yourself. And that provides quite an internal dark night of the soul, when you have to get out of a straight jacket, and when you believe that you could pray away the gay and all of that. So that has been a profound experience for me, and I'm glad to talk with people even more privately about that, and how you get unwrapped and what that's like. But in the practice in Stone Circle Wicca, our 2nd degree initiation is the underworld path. And we have a very formalized way of having a very personal and untutored practice. So in other words, it's kind of like you go off swimming, and you have a person that's responsible for you to make sure you don't drown, and make sure if your hand comes up, you need help, that there's someone there to be a support for you. But we have some structure in different practices that we do to help people delve in and unfold what the mysteries of things that are dark. And not all things that are dark are bad. So we try to help people befriend all of the goodness there. A little bit later, I could probably talk about some more specific practices that we do with our 13 tools of Stone Circle Wicca. But I think the most important thing is the daily head trip that can happen in society nowadays. When things look bleak, they look bad, the world is crazy. There's thousands of people protesting down in Washington, D.C. right now, and so many other places on either side of Israel and Palestine. When things look so bad, how do you take care of that gunk that comes up? And how do you have a sense of power? And how do you have a sense of hope in the middle of all of that? So there's several different topics I can speak about.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay. So those that are wearing glasses, I invite you to take your glasses off, because this portion will involve you to touch your eyes. So oftentimes in Zoom land, we neglect our faces because we're spending so much time on our backs, on our asses. I mean, like, a lot of the time we don't get to get in touch with our face and kind of help release some tension. So what we'll do is we'll just rub our hands together really fast and get them really warm. And then when you feel it's right, we're just going to rest gently the heels of or palms of our hands on our eyes. And just let that warmth kind of seep in, and take a few deep breaths, as comfortable and as natural as it is for you. And then we'll gently take 2 fingertips and move them down the center, meet them in the center of our skulls, and run them gently up and down. Paying attention to any kind of tension or stress or discomfort we may have, so that we may address it at another time. And then once you get to the top of your skull, just gently go in concentric circles around your eyes. Just your brow. Be gentle. There's not much there to provide resistance to touch. And then follow your brow to your temples and lightly massage those. And with each circle, get wider till you touch your ears. And at the top of your ears, once you get there, just gently massage around the back behind your ears and feel those natural grooves where your skull, where your lower jaw and your upper jaw, kind of lower jaw tucks into your upper jaw. Just feel that nice hill between the upper and the lower. Gentle circles. Get to that tiny little dip behind your earlobes, and just gently pull one fingertip behind that. And then come back around to the front of your ear, right where that little knot is. That's in front of the holes in your ears. And just gently move forward, concentric circles around your cheekbone, And when you get to your nose, gently trace the outline of the bone and where the bone meets the cartilage, and just gently go nice long strokes where that bone is, where it meets the cartilage. And when you get to your back to your cheekbones, pause there for a minute and just rub those cheekbones. And pay attention to your breaths. And then we'll slowly draw a circle back to your ears, where your lower jaw meets your upper jaw. And we'll go behind the lower jaw and just do some gentle circles right where that little dip was by your earlobes. And then nice long strokes under your jaw, lower jaw. Just getting that hinge there. And then trace that, go down, tracing your neck till you hit your clavicle bones, and just go up and down slowly. It's hard for me to do this with this hoodie, but and then pause when you get to your clavicle bones and take a few deep breaths as you are comfortable. And slowly open your eyes. Touch any part of your face just to remind yourself where that extra tension was that you'll need to come back to. And during the day, pay attention to that area and just give it a little extra love and attention. And when you're ready, just give me a thumbs up, because some of you don't have your videos on. Okay, there we are. Sweet. All right. Well, I hope that didn't put anyone to sleep. That was just to help reduce some of that Zoom tension. So to start, some of these questions, we're going to take turns. Each panelist is going to, get a fair shot at addressing some of these questions. And before I move on to the next question, well, everyone will get a shot and then I'll move on to the next question. So some of these questions may be like in different parts. But we'll start. I'm going to go alphabetically here with Anthony. So Anthony, what is your earliest memory celebrating an event or holiday with a group other than your family, which celebrated or commemorated the underworld or otherworld?
I would probably have to say it was with a homemade coven. It was a group of friends. We were all very eclectic. Each of us had our own separate path, but yet we came together, and that diversity brought us together and kept us strong at the beginning. At the end, it's kind of what separated us, but we all understood. But one of our first rituals that we did together was actually a spring ritual. And we journeyed into the underworld to return Persephone to the surface. And we had a very unique guided meditation and interaction with the underworld, the dead, Hades, and then at the end, Persephone. And that was incredibly moving for me. So yeah, I was probably 19 at the time. I had just moved out, just graduated. Let's just say I lived in the closet the entire time until I could escape. And when Eldritch talked about praying the gay away, yeah, I tried and I couldn't, but I'm glad I didn't. But as he said, that's another story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Next would be Eldritch.
Can you help me with my Libra focus here for a minute?
Oh, for sure.
Are we talking about actual death rites, or are we for people that are passing, or about metaphysical?
Celebrating or commemorating any kind of thing that acknowledges the underworld or otherworld. What is your first memory of an event that revolved around that with a group other than your family?
I think growing up, I'm going to talk a little bit about funerary rites, because we associate that with the underworld, but in our metaphysical practices, the word underworld takes on this other 3D, 4D kind of dimension to it. But, I grew up north of Pittsburgh. I'm a blue collar kid at heart. And we grew up in a home area that was very much of people that are white from so many different parts of the old countries, and everybody would talk about the old country, but none of us in my generation were to speak our language, the language of the old country. We were supposed to be good Americans, speaking a good English, so we lost a lot. We lost a lot, and that's a different workshop. But the idea of the old ways and looking in our community, attending different people's funeral rites was very different. What different people would do in their family and their homes in helping somebody have what they needed to pass through. Some people in the Catholic community were praying, doing prayers for people so that they could go through purgatory and help assist and support them in their spiritual journey. Other people you would just see it happen all the time growing up, where someone had passed and was laid out in a coffin, and people would be passing coins under the pillows to help them pay the ferryman. And most of the time, the next generation lost what they were doing or what the actual stories were. You just knew, find a quarter, find 2 quarters, put them under the pillow. It's weird and creepy, but do it anyway. People lost the meaning behind it. So, those practices have shifted and changed. And the other was growing up and seeing in different people's homes, the very quiet niche altars or kind of memorial tables. They wouldn't call them an altar, but the idea of setting out the memory of the family so that you keep them in mind and keep them in mind for a whole year, and understanding that there are different things that you do along the way that also help the people on this side grieve. And that the last thing I'll tell you about that was just this is a more pray away the gay kind of story, but it was earth-shattering for me. I had been to the National Mall in DC for during the time that the AIDS quilt, the Names Project AIDS quilt, was laid out. And that began the start of an interfaith service that's gone on for 42 years in DC, an LGBT interfaith service that is very homegrown and people love going to it. But I was there for one weekend doing that. And the next weekend, I went to a pagan concert with an older group called Velvet Hammer.
I think I may have heard of that.
And if you look up Velvet Hammer and There Is No Hell, that was an amazing thing to hear people in rock band. There is no hell. We do not die. We are alive. We are just on the other side. And that kind of was the opening of like, oh, well, then what is there if there's no hell per se?
Mhm.
And so that was very cathartic for me and helpful. So I think the funerary practices that we've grown up with are important.
Mm.
Later on, I can talk about the pagan funerary practices that I've been to, but
Great.
enough for the moment.
Thank you, Eldritch.
Sure.
Matthew, you're up.
Dallán, I do apologize. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I think you're asking what's my earliest memory of participating in a celebration or commemoration of the underworld or otherworld with others.
Mhm.
I don't have one.
Hmm.
What I'm hearing and experiencing is, for me, is that question comes with certain presuppositions.
Mhm.
It presupposes that, let me back up a little bit. It's I think I'm coming from a different culture than you. So for me, the underworld, the otherworld, the idea of celebrating or commemorating that place, I don't even understand what that means. That would be like, what's your earliest memory of celebrating or commemorating Disney World? What's your earliest memory of celebrating or commemorating the Washington Monument? For me, the underworld, the otherworld is a place. It is a place I go to, a place I visit routinely. It is a place from which visitors come to speak with me. So I just don't understand coming together with a group of people to celebrate or commemorate a place. I just go there.
Okay. No, that's a fair response. Thank you.
Closest way, and this is going to sound really weird, I mean, you said without family, but honestly, the closest thing I could come to that is with my family. I grew up Catholic. I grew up celebrating Halloween. And even as a small child, I knew intuitively that Halloween was a time when the veil was thin. And so I think for me, the closest I've come to what you allude to in your question is my ordinary Halloween experiences growing up.
Okay. Well, thank you. No, I really do hope to not offend when I ask questions.
I'm not offended at all. I'm just I just kind of feel like,
Well, like, yeah, how do you answer that? Yeah. I saw when I first asked that question, I saw the gears turning in your head. So I'm like, I'm gonna give him some time. But no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like, how do you, I mean, I guess acknowledge, or what would be the first time you acknowledged that underworld?
the first time I've acknowledged the underworld was, in a very deliberate way, was probably when I started dabbling in what we can call core shamanism. Westernized animistic practice under the Michael Harner school of thought. So doing journeys, many moons ago, when I first did my first deliberate journeys. I think we all journey. We all are traveling in the other world when we sleep and we go into the dream time. The dream time is a part of the other world. So this isn't something that's alien to any of us. What's unusual is when someone deliberately and consciously engages in that level of experience. So I would say, as a baby witch in my grandparents' basement, in the dark, in my grandfather's easy chair, journeying, probably around the age of 14, 13. That's probably my first experience of deliberately and consciously encountering the other side.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's more of a place of like intentionally going, as kind of where I was going with, like, celebrating an event, like intentionally recognizing and acknowledging. But yeah, You got it. Thanks, Matthew. Eldritch, you raised your hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and then it kind of got lost again because you said intentionally. But I remember with a boyhood friend who I later realized was a boyfriend, we were fooling around with a Ouija board and things like that. And I had this really clear image of my step grandmother's face and head just hovering above us. And I didn't know what that was.
Mm.
And it wasn't in the Bible and it had to be bad. But it was later on that I found out families having the gift. It was like, oh, that was like a glimmer of the gift. So I had this like thing that was wonderment. And that was my earliest recollection of there's something in someone still there and reaching out to me, and I could reach out to them.
Sweet. Yeah, that good old spirit board. So the next question I'd like to propose to you guys is if you are a member of a tradition, like a group, because not everyone is. I mean, some people are solo practitioners. What are some other ways that you may acknowledge with intention the other world or underworld? We talked about funeral rites. We talked about journeying, dreaming, and I believe there was one other. Help me out. Was it oh, my brain's not working. But so what are some other ways you guys can think about that that you acknowledge or with intention or work with the other world? I know there's a lot of questions in that question. I'm sorry. Yeah, I got Anthony scratching his head.
Yes, that's a very deep question. When it comes to my work with the death current, I'm predominantly solitary. I do have a number of fellow practitioners who also work within the death current, and sometimes we do stuff together. Two of my friends, they take on the doula aspect. So helping people prepare for death. I have not been fully attracted to that. I usually am here for the living to help them through the death process of a loved one. And of course, understanding what that means. So I do a lot of mediumship as well as grief counseling with people sometimes. I don't know if that's actually celebratory, but it kind of is. I think it kind of is. In my magical workings, I often rely upon the dead to assist and aid. Most of the time it's ancestral. A big part of what I do is ancestral. But here in my hometown, I have a very lovely cemetery and I have a graveyard. I have one of each in my area, and I have been living here for about 6 years, and it's still a work in process, knowing the spirits that linger there. And they're just starting to open up to me beyond conversation to actually assist in doing work. And of course, I'll talk about that more tomorrow. A lot of it is actually protective work and healing work. So of course, I always like to celebrate those dead that have been there for a long time. Like I don't even know if they have families left anymore. I'm very attracted to old graveyards just to show up and be like, hi, how are you? How are things going? I have a very different view of spirit. It's kind of Egyptian. There's many parts of the spirit, the Ka, the Ba, the part that goes on to live eternally, the part that becomes the ancestor, the part that just hangs out with the body. So I think that just connecting with them and just reminding, especially in military graveyards, just reminding these spirits and thanking them. So I guess that's kind of the way that I do that. And of course, personal practice, I celebrate birthdays and death days of people. I think it's very important to commemorate when they were born, but it's also very important to commemorate them in death because it elevates them. It raises them up. And when it comes to ancestral worship and veneration, when you lift up your ancestors, they in turn can lift you up. And my practice, because I actually had read an article some time ago written by Hyperion when he was talking about the ancestors of men who love men. So thank you, all you unnamed path gentlemen. That opened up my ancestral practice to not only mean ancestors of blood and bone. There's ancestors of the heart, people who I truly care for. There's ancestors of what I call purpose, which means the men who love men, or ancestors who were poetic writers or authors or dancers or whatever. I think you can find an ancestor for that, and venerating them and having that connection with them is a way to honor and celebrate. This year was the first time I incorporated a new practice called Days of the Dead. And I'm researching it because I got it from a fellow necromancer who lives out in California from his blog. I think it was a he, but that blog has since vanished. And I only got my notes of what exactly happens on the 7 days. But I think it's related to Dia de los Muertos. Every day there's a different type of dead who is honored, and you're building this altar to them. And it was really cool. It was really cool. I was very fortunate because I was in New Orleans at the same time I was doing my personal veneration in New Orleans during Halloween. So there was lots of festivities. But I think that's kind of how I do it. I guess, but I'm still scratching my head on that one.
Eldritch is thinking about it. He's unmuted though. I don't think he realizes that.
I think that understanding and navigating the underworld often comes up in so many world culture mythos. And oftentimes as American pagans, we borrow pantheons and we borrow stories from other cultures. The Persephone myth is one that's often told and used in group ritual. And in the Wiccan tradition of standing around in a circle and people meditating and having a grounding and centering, and then taking a journey down into the underworld and then coming back up together as a group practice is an important practice. And seeing who you would meet there, who has wisdom or words for you or gives you a gift. Those are practices that are familiar to me. I have other practices, but I consider them much more upper world, so I'll hold off on that.
Okay, for me, I'm going to answer in 2 parts. So, obviously, yes, I am very involved in Unnamed Path. But I think it's always important for folks to know Unnamed Path is not a religion. Unnamed Path is not in and of itself. It does not purport to be a complete toolkit, a complete system of magic or animism or what have you. I like to think of it more as a plugin than an operating system. There, to my knowledge, everyone in Unnamed Path has either come to the table with an existing tradition. It might be Druidism, it might be Santeria, and many people who initiate an Unnamed Path go on and supplement. They might go on to explore other things. So we have initiates who have gone on to also become and initiate into Gardnerian Wicca or Vodou or what have you. So all that being said, so from the Unnamed Path tradition, we have what we regularly do. A very important part of our practice is the Circle of Bones. In layman's terms, it's basically a seance. It's basically a spiritual mass. The Circle of Bones is the rite that we use to communicate with the dead and the mighty dead and the ancestors and spirits in general, but definitely particularly those from the underworld. We are also taught and introduced to working with graveyard spirits. And being that it is a tradition that is very much driven by the ancestors of men who love men, and we are taught to work with them in our work, all of us do regularly communicate with those underworld people, whether it be through journeying or divination or possessory work or other methods. So that's the Unnamed Path portion of it. For me, in addition, I have been very serious about my ancestor work for many years. And what does that look like? Well, I was taught Spiritism, particularly Puerto Rican style, Espiritismo. And so I maintain what we call a bóveda espiritual, which is a form of ancestor altar. That's kind of an oversimplification, but you get the idea. And I have a service that I do weekly. So I feed my ancestors, I feed my spirits weekly. And that includes both spirit guides, upper world guardian spirits, as well as underworld ancestral spirits as well. And then I think for me, personally, I don't work as much with the dead as other folks. A lot of my spirit contact tends to be with nature spirits. So for me, just sitting outside, and I don't even have to be in the wilderness, just sitting outside beneath the sky, sitting outside in the backyard is an opportunity for me to shift into a state of consciousness where I'm able to connect with the genie loci, with the nature spirits, with wind, with sky, with grass, and the animal powers and all of our wonderful relatives whom we tend to ignore a bit too much. And I think that's it. I think that sums up my answer.
That's great. Thank you for answering. Because that leads into my next question, actually. I was going to ask you all how your practices are reflected in or supported by your immediate geographic community, like not just, we'll just say immediate geographic community, your gnosis for the most part.
I think the thing that I miss most from the days of COVID and that is actually getting and being together in person. And one of the practices in Stone Circle Wicca that we enjoy greatly and is common to most pagan groups is to have a fire circle and a drum circle, and to be able to dance and trance around a fire. And we teach a lot about the technologies and techniques for how to go from here's an idea to a thought to a prayer to a meditation space, and then falling deeper into trance, and then being possessed is a falling into trance, and then another entity comes into you and twins with you. But possession is not the focus of our practice. It's the place of getting an idea, a thought, being able to go deeper into a meditative space, and being supported by a drum circle and the movement and all of the things that go along with that, dancing and trancing, and finding information and inspiration from that depth of world from within, and to understand the connection and cycles of here's the fire in front of me, and going down to the molten core of the earth, and then that energy coming back up through my feet and through all of my chakra points and up, and then out to the Celestine, and then over and then down back to the fire, and creating a cycle so that your physical body can keep up with what your mind and heart are doing. And then to also have someone who is a tether, a spotter, that will watch you to make sure you don't hurt yourself or injure yourself, and also to keep other people from helping when a person just needs to be in their space in the underworld. Leave them be and let them do the thing. We also teach one other practice called periscoping up. It's not a technical term, more of a common term of, like, if you're in trance, there's still a piece of you that says, I need water, and then comes down. And so that you can have a sustained trance space, so that you can have a sustained experience in that meditative space, which can often be called the underworld.
So, yeah, another hard question to answer. I think that there are two ways for me to answer this. If I'm speaking and focusing directly on the underworld, if I'm focusing on the dead, death magic, the death current, there's not a lot of people in our community who do that. I think they do. I think it's a natural part of our magic. It's just other right-wing groups have labeled certain things demonic or evil or whatever. And that's one of the reasons why I personally am very open about, my left-hand path work and the fact that I work with the dead, because I want to break those misunderstandings. Left-hand and right-hand path, we're all doing the same work. It's a little bit different. One shines the light on it. One dives into the darkness to find the light. And I've been teaching in our community, and I think our community here is a robust community. And people are starting to experiment or to learn. So whenever I teach a class or anything here in Columbus, regardless of what it's about, I get a lot of people that don't want to ever ask questions out in the open up front. They wait till they can pull me aside. So on that aspect, I think there's a lot of curiosity, and I think there's a lot of learners out there that want to know, because they have been told for so long it's bad, it's evil, it's whatever. But yet on the other hand, I am connected with a local group that calls themselves, we don't have a formal name, we just jokingly call ourselves the Oracular Spectacular. And once every 3 months, there's a group of us that get together and we journey into the underworld. And a lot of our training and our practice comes from Diana Paxson and her studies. So we've done this for a couple years now, and we connect to the ancestors or to the spirits or whatnot. And those are always very popular and well attended. And they've always been really wonderful events to have. And people are so willing to participate. So while I think to a certain degree, there's still this fear, people are curious. But I guess maybe it just depends on how you package it. So I kind of hope I answered your question in a roundabout way.
No right or wrong answers, guys. Like, just so you know, there are no right or wrong answers. So, you offered some points on and ways on how to help dispel some of the myths or stereotypes that are involved with the underworld or otherworld. I'm kind of curious to see or to hear if Matthew or Eldritch has anything to add to that, because outreach is kind of an issue now because of how divisive our current climate is. I was just wondering, what are some ways we can do to help build some bridges in the community, or at least recover those that are lost or alone, to help shelter them.
Well, I think, herding fags is like herding cats.
I know.
And
yeah.
As I'm a new daddy to two beautiful 4-month-old kittens, I think that surfing has a lot to teach us about cat herding. And I've struggled with this in the past because I have my ideas of what we should be doing, and very logical. This is what we should be doing. And why aren't people grokking it? Why aren't people agreeing with what I'm saying? Or they say they agree, but they're not following through. But people aren't motivated by logic. People are motivated by feeling, whether they admit it or not. And what we have going on in our favor is that the forbidden, the taboo, the witchy, the spooky is all very, very fashionable. And so that is a great ramp, so to speak, to introducing people to this kind of work. If you look at what kinds of books are selling, what kind of workshops are well attended, anything involving the dead or anything involving fairy are both very popular. So now is a great time to introduce people to working with the underworld and or otherworld, because the zeitgeist is already desiring it, because it's cool, because it's edgy, it's it's what the cool kids want to do. When I was years ago, when I was much more goth and dark than I am now, it was not cool. But now it is. But I think that's a good thing, because if we offer things that pertain to the underworld and the otherworld, the dead, the spirits of the dead, fairy, fae beings, people are going to be drawn to that, because there's something in people right now that is asking for it.
When you talk about reaching out to people in the community or people in general, I'm a community organizer by heart. And so I always think about, well, who's the group that there? What if I'm talking with one person, what groups are they attached to? And I also have ringing in my head the words of, do you know Harry Hay, one of the founders of the Radical Fairies? He said, the only thing that homosexuals and heterosexuals have in common is what they do in bed. And he believed that we were fantastic creatures with a totally different, deeper orientation. And at the same time, community organizers, right? And at the same time, community organizers saying, wait a minute, we are more common than we are different. So let's celebrate our commonalities. So if you're in one of those conversations, then you can then think, well, are they religious or spiritual? And then, or are they secular? And there are ways that talking to people who are secular sometimes is easier about that, they don't have all this dogma crap all over them, and, so you can just say, hey, well, I like to meditate and chill out. And, I've actually felt that someone has whispered in my ear and it was a family member, and, and you can have that a family member that's passed. So sometimes you can have very open conversations with people, but take them where they're at. If you're talking with either group, religious or non-religious, I put in the chat here the book Anatomy of Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And inside that book is a chart. And the chart is, standard table with a seated figure in meditation with the chakra stars going up the middle. And on one side is the Catholic sacraments. And on the other side is an explanation of the chakras. And what's similar to it, it is really uncanny. It's worth taking some time to look at. But in Catholic religions, people will, just insist that you have to have a priest when somebody passes over to give them divine unction and do the prayers and all of that with them. And it's very interesting because the uppermost chakra kind of aligns in that with the divine unction. So I'm like, we probably, we're meatsicles. We're bodies with spirits inside, and we're more similar in that way. So I think, you have to be clever and find the right things that can open a conversation rather than shut down a conversation. Always leave them with wonder so that they're wondering more.
Right. So creating that space for them to talk about whatever is on their mind, or to ask whatever questions they may have about your practice, or what you're
always asking more questions than you say. Lead them up, because you can fill a moment with chatter and jabber, and it may not be what the person wants or needs or is open to hearing. So active listening, yes.
Sweet. Well, I think we're at 6 minutes to the top of the hour, and I think, aren't we taking a break at 5 for dinner? I think that's what I saw on the schedule. I just want to give some time to make sure we have to open it up for Q&A for anyone.
So to answer your question, Dallán,
yes,
we are taking a dinner break at 5. You're slated for 3 p.m. to 4:15 p.m.
Oh, okay. So perfect.
But because we have a break 5 to 6, I think you can go a little over if you want. So especially if there are questions that, people want to ask.
Yeah, I just wanted to open this time up for Q&A for those that have been listening to the panelists. And thank you, panelists, again, for being open and expressive, sharing what your thoughts and feelings and your practices are. So yeah, I open the floor to all participants for any Q&As that our panelists may have. I see Sphinx.
Hi, just for the different panelists, there's been a lot of discussion around left and right-hand path. What is your understandings when we use those terms? I want to make sure we're having similar conversation. Like, what do we mean? What do you hear we mean when we say left hand and right hand path? Like, if y'all would address that.
I'll jump in on that, since I know I'm the one who talked about it directly. So I can tell you what my community views them, and then I will tell you what I view them. So in my community, somehow, somewhere, Right hand path is the path of the good witch, the healer, the person who does things for the good of people, and the black path or the left hand path are for the people who sit around and curse everyone all the time. I mean, that is a legitimate belief here in my area. Me personally, I believe that, like I said, they're both equal and separate. I see a lot of people on the right-hand path. They are healers, but so am I. They have wanted to and hope to eventually achieve a level of where they may unite with Source and perhaps not need to continuously get involved into the path of reincarnation. Now, that's a little bit more Eastern in the philosophy. But, you know, when I talk to people and I ask their views of that, that's usually what they mean, that I'm going to live a good life and I'm going to do the thing and I'm going to connect with Source. For me, I want to live a good life. I want to do the thing. I want to help people. I want to help people to become their best. But I don't necessarily want to merge with Source. I kind of want to become my own source. This is about me as a creature of the gods, or I do believe in the ultimate creator. But he or she is way too busy and ain't got time for us. So that's why there's these other gods and spirits, intermediaries. But we were created in their image. So we were given the spark. Prometheus gave us fire, but then yet the gods gave us the God fire or the God spark. And I want to become my own deity. Actually, I really don't want to be a god. I'll be flat out honest. I love working with the dead so much. If I become a ferryman or someone that would help people, you know, transition over, maybe that's my supernatural nerddom coming out. But I would love to be a keeper and just be there for people when it's their time to help them cross over so they're not afraid. That's kind of what my ultimate goal is. And maybe one of these days I'll achieve it. But that's kind of my view of left-hand path and right-hand path. We're both trying to achieve something, but there may be some very slight differences.
Well, I'm going to be very upfront and say that I hate the metaphor of left hand, right hand. I'm left-handed and I find it offensive. But I'm not offended, guys. I'm not offended. I find a lot of things going on with the English language to be offensive to a lot of people. Sphinx, thank you for this question because it's a fantastic question. You know, George Bernard Shaw said that, you know, something, I can't remember the exact quote, but something along the lines of the Americans and the Brits are divided by a common language. So one thing that is a struggle is that I've realized that different people, left hand and right hand is a metaphor. But any metaphor can be applied to many different things. Don't put the cart before the horse. Well, what's the cart, what's the horse depends on the situation. Different people use left hand, right hand to signify completely different things. And I've even had conversations with people where the other person has switched. They're talking about left hand, right hand, with the left hand meaning this, the right hand that, and then all of a sudden it's a different metaphor. So even they're confused. So there's a lot of ways of looking at it, you know, especially a lot of the New Age language will define right-hand path as service to others, left-hand path as service to self. There are other people who will define left hand, right hand in more gendered terms. So meaning the right hand path being the more masculine aligned path versus the left hand being the more feminine aligned path. In Unnamed Path, where we draw a distinction between the light god and the dark god, there is a soft association of the dark god with the left hand and the light god with the right hand. But what does that mean? Well, in that context, our dark god signifies our natural and healthy and wonderful animal intelligence. I want to eat. I want to sleep. I want to fuck. These are natural, healthy, beautiful things that should not be demonized. Versus the light god energy, which is more enlightened, and in the sense of, I'm going to take a bird's eye view. My personal animal needs have been sated, and now I'm going to look at what's best for the community, what's best for the world, and kind of that, how do things look from up in the sky? So that's another way of applying the left hand, right hand metaphor. So you can't talk about left hand versus right hand because without qualifying how you're applying that metaphor. And that's very important. When you're going to use that metaphor, please be very explicit in how you're applying it, because many people apply it in many different ways.
Gotta love context.
Right. Well, for those of us that have the context of Bugs Bunny, very early we were set upon with this idea of taking a left-hand turn at Albuquerque. And, that was the wrong direction to go left. And so it's so embedded in the English language that, and we put some things in the chat about sinister and all of that. I want to take a bit of a turn on this, so bear with me. I don't know exactly what the orientation of this is when you're seeing it, but imagine a chart where the line goes along and then all of a sudden there's an increase and then a leveling off. Okay, so in 1910, 1920, 1930, and 1940, the number of left-handed people were minimal. It was just along the way. And then all of a sudden in 1940, it shot up. And there were all of these left-handed people everywhere because they took the laws off the books and the teaching curriculums to stop smacking kids on the hands to say, use your right hand, use the right hand because it's the right hand. And so, that shift in culture has happened, but our language is still generations from that being dissolved. Now, there's also, I'm a community organizer, so take the same example of why are there so many transgender people in the world? There's been nobody until they started teaching about it and people got woke, and now there's all of these transgender. No, this is the normal. This is the normal level of people who are left-handed. This is the normal level of people who are transgender. You've been suppressing them in society all along.
And one thing I want to add as a left-handed person is that for me, the metaphor of left hand versus right hand is very much connected to our understanding of right-brained versus left-brained. So my go-to when I hear left hand is to think, oh, we're talking about right brain stuff. So that's intuition. That's using uncanny logic. That's the catonic, the mysterious, the more subliminal, communicating in pictures, versus right hand, aka left brained, being language, words, logic, mathematics, more structured way of doing things. And that comes through in our practice. Some of my practice, I might do a ritual that is more left-brained / right-hand path, in that it's something very structured with frankincense and prayer. But then there might be another kind of practice with, okay, we're going to go out to the, to the graveyard at midnight and open ourselves up to whatever comes up intuitively, which, you're using more of your right brain / left hand capacities there. Yeah, it's metaphors are tricksy.
Especially when they no longer apply to current times. They're used as crutches sometimes.
Dallán, if I may, the society is shifting and changing, and I'm seeing it in pagan communities where we're learning not to say that, you know, dark is evil and white is right. You know, we're shifting those kinds of things. Another common practice when I got married to my 6'7" ginger giant of a guy, I'm 5'5", so it's kind of funny. And we did a hand fasting cord that had 4 ribbons, and 2 of them were the tartan from my family and the tartan from his family, and then a purple ribbon for the queer community. And then we had a black ribbon that we used to say, this is what we see before we're born, and then we are born, and then we go back to this is what we see in death. That you come from the mystery and you go into the mystery, but the mystery is not evil. It is not scary. It is welcoming and life-giving. So I think things are shifting, and you'll see it in your own personal practices when you write rituals and when you are constructing your altars and at your home, you know, even the things that you choose to wear and symbolize. So I think we're in a good shift, but it's a slow shift.
Mm-hmm.
Just a real quick comment on what Matthew said about being left-handed. I do teach a lecture on what left hand is, and we touch on all of those people being left-handed, or in general how women are evil because they are the left hand. There are so many out there. It's ridiculous, and it's really entertaining. So if you want to jump down a rabbit hole, look up the history of left-handedness and right-handedness, both in and out of magic. It's hysterical.
Okay, just a gentle time reminder. We have 6 minutes left. So I just want to make sure if you have questions, feel free to, now's your time. You guys are so quiet. Maybe you just need to pause and breathe for a second. I get it.
So perhaps a simple question. What does darkness symbolize to you? And are you shifting or changing? What's it meant for you, and is it shifting?
For me, right off the bat, the first thing that comes to me, what does darkness mean to me? The womb, the goddess, the dark goddess, the source of all creation, the infinite potential of all things, the void point singularity out of which everything has come. To me, when I think of darkness, that's ultimately where my mind goes with that association.
I always like the darkness. I'm gonna answer a question now. So whenever people talk about the moon, and you know, they always talk about the full moon, and they talk about full moon rituals and whatnot, I always ask the question, well, what about the new moon? What about the dark moon? Why are we not like honoring that? And so that darkness where there's nothing but starlight, and in Michigan we get very little of that because it's almost overcast all the time. So we get a lot of darkness here. But I always describe that as I always feel safe because I feel held in that darkness. Like I just feel encompassed by it. Like there's nothing between me and the darkness. And it just feels comforting.
For me,
whereas before I used to be scared to death of it.
When I first stepped onto the path of magic, I was, it's all dark. I wear black all the time. I do all my magic at night. And then something happened, and I realized I love daytime too, but I still love nighttime very much. And they all have their very separate importance. But I kind of want to touch on what you just said about the dark of the moon. I do love the dark of the moon because to me, in Greek times, the dark of the moon represented the last day of the month, and you had specific things that you did the day before, the day of, and the day after in order to prepare yourself for the next month. So for me, the dark of the moon is about I'm setting my intention for the next 30 days. These are the things I'm going to do. These are what I'm going to accomplish. And it's also an opportunity for me to reach out to my guides and spirits and be like, hey, what do I need to do to be prepared for this? So for me, specifically the dark of the moon, that's what that means. It's a chance to prepare myself and set my intention. At least for the next 30 days.
So we are now at 4:13 Eastern time. If there aren't any questions, or if you have any burning questions, feel free. Oh, Roman typed up something here. Do you mind if I read Roman? Okay, so Roman typed, was trying to create my own calendar. And I learned that the reason that any culture that has a holiday start at sunset, is that before light, there was darkness. So that was one point. And then the second point, I had a discussion with my mother at one point about healing. She only wants to look to the light to heal. And I told her that's great, but you can't truly heal until you dive into the darkness to shine the healing light on what needs to be healed. Yeah, any surgeon's going to need a light in there to like figure out what they're going to be cutting next, for sure.
Yeah, I love what Roman wrote. I mean, yes and yes.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things. I think just like with the left-handed thing, I think part of this culture that we've been born into, which I call a culture out of balance, is that this culture indoctrinates the human beings being born into it with misconceptions. One of those being that dark represents evil. Now there is reasons for that evolution of that concept. Before we had electricity, nighttime was very scary. There were very real threats. If you did go abroad in the dark, especially during the dark of the moon, when there's very little light at all, you could get hurt, killed, raped, horrible things. And so for many, many thousands of years, our ancestors learned, those ancestors who survived were the ones that said, we'll go to that, we're going to have our nighttime parties at the full moon because it's safer for people to get to and fro. And dark moon, we're just going to kind of stay home. Because if you don't do that, it's survival of the fittest. You're going to have more accidents. You're not, So, but that evolved into, unfortunately, this concept of dark being evil, etc. And I think we're at a point now in our evolution where for us to heal collectively, we have to undo that programming. I've been doing, I've heard it said to me a while ago, that actually the way to the light is through the dark. You can't get to the real spiritual light except through the darkness. Or another way of putting it is you can't really, the gateway to your higher self is actually your lower self. Think about that for a minute. And then I experienced that. You know, what does that mean on a personal level, on a visceral level? And then I experienced, I'm like, holy shit, that's true. But you know, if you just tell someone that, it might be hard for them to grok it. For us to become enlightened, I think we have to descend into the underworld, into our personal underworld, into our personal darkness. Big part, one of my, what I think is the greatest strengths of Unnamed Path is its emphasis on shadow work, which is just that. We are, through our apprenticeship, we are taught and trained in stepping into our darkness and confronting our fear, because that's the only way we can face our traumas. That's the only way we can heal from our traumas and reclaim our power.
That is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and take this time to go ahead and ask us to go ahead and wrap things up for tonight, or for this particular workshop. I want to thank Dallán and all of our panelists for this workshop. And the next event we have, we're going to have about an hour break. It's actually, it'll be more like an hour and 40 minutes or so for a dinner break, lunch break, depending on what time zone you're in. At 6 p.m. Eastern time, again, that's about an hour and 40 minutes away. We will have Global Queer Mythology with Thomas Prower. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone there. And thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
This was an honor.
Thank you, Dallán.